Hey everybody, this is the second video of my advice to you about how I would approach this vaccine paper that Mrs. Ipple is assigning. Now, in the first video we sort of broke down the directions. In this assignment, I'm going to walk through how I would make an outline for my paper based on the directions. Now, to my knowledge, Mrs. Ipple isn't requiring you to make an outline, but I just will say to you that I know 100% for sure that if you make an outline, your paper is going to be much better. So I'd highly recommend that you follow along with me in this process to bring some planning and order to your essay writing as well. I'm going to be using the three colors that I was talking about in the first video. For you 8th graders, it's going to make a little more sense to you, although for you 7th graders, hopefully, even if you don't get the color idea, just seeing it laid out here is going to be useful to you as well. So let's go ahead and get started. What I always like to do when I make an outline is leave myself 3 lines of space and then draw a horizontal line across my page like that. And this little space at the top is where I always like to write my thesis statement. I write TS right there. And my thesis statement is something that I always color green. It's going to be like the big idea of my paper. So I already know what the big idea of this paper is going to be. Mrs. Ipple told me what it needed to be in the directions. It needs to be about the vaccine making process. So let me see if I can turn that into a sentence, because if I just write the vaccine making process, that's not a complete sentence yet. So I could write something like, in this paper, I will discuss the steps of the vaccine making process, period. That would be a thesis statement. Or I could make vaccine making process the subject of my sentence and say something like, the vaccine making process, or making a vaccine is a complex process that has many steps or several steps. Either one of those would be okay. There's not just one way to write a thesis statement, but I'm going to go ahead and write that second one. So creating a vaccine is a complex process. I think I might have, don't get too worried about spelling, is a complex process that has several steps. All right, so I have my green. Basically, your green just needs to make sure that you're telling your readers that they know that you're writing about the process or the steps of making a vaccine. Now, this whole thesis statement, you're welcome to add more to it and give some context and some background. But this is going to be your first paragraph, your introduction paragraph. So I'll just keep track of what number of paragraph it is over here on the side. Okay? So our first paragraph is going to state our thesis, which is creating a vaccine is a complex process that has several steps. Now I'm going to go through and list out what are going to be my big ideas, my supporting ideas, basically talking about the different phases or steps. And I'm going to put those on this side, the left-hand side of this line that I just drew. On this side, I'm going to talk about the elaboration or the explanation or examples that I'm going to give for my big ideas. So, star 1, I like to use stars to show big ideas or supporting ideas, and I also use the color yellow to show those. So star 1, what does Mrs. Ipple want me to talk about first? By the way, this is going to be actually my second paragraph, because the first one's going to be the introduction. Now the second paragraph, it's really the first full body paragraph, but we'll call it paragraph 2. Mrs. Ipple, start with a thesis statement. Yep, done. She wants me to talk about understanding the virus. Okay, so the first step in the process of making a vaccine is to understand the virus. So I'm just going to say that. First, a vaccine maker has to understand the virus, period. Okay? That is going to be, in a sense, the topic sentence of this paragraph. This whole paragraph is going to be about understanding the virus. And I'm just going to highlight the word first right here for a second, because that's something that we haven't talked about yet in communications, but is really important. When you're starting a paragraph, this is like your first body paragraph here, it's really important to always begin your yellow, your big idea, with something called a transition word. A transition word is like a little signpost that helps your reader know where they are in your essay. And so this first helps them know, okay, this is a signal to me that this is the first big point. So I put the word first in there. There are lots of transition words you can use, but first is an example. It's just important to make sure that you do include transition words when you're starting that new paragraph with a new yellow. All right, so I'm just going to draw another line across here. That's going to be paragraph 2. Now, this will be the topic sentence, but all the other sentences that come after it are going to be reds. And red is the color that I use to talk about elaboration, meaning you're expanding on this. You're giving specific examples and evidence to an explanation about this. So understanding the virus, well, what does that mean? Well, Mrs. Zippel already told us. She said, talk about what the structure of the coronavirus is and the function of the 4 main parts of the coronavirus. Okay? So our reds are going to be the structure of the coronavirus and the function of the 4 main parts. Okay? Now, I want you guys to see here really quick that each one of these 2 reds that I made right here are probably going to be more than 1 sentence. I'm just generically saying that you're going to explain these 2 things in your reds. I'm not saying it's only going to take you 2 sentences. It might take you several sentences to talk about what the structure is, and it's probably going to take you 4 sentences to talk about the 4 parts and what their function is. So this is going to be a lot more than just 2 sentences. I'm just saying this is what you're going to do in that part of your paragraph. Okay? Let's move on to the next big idea, or the next supporting idea, star 2, which is going to be our 3rd paragraph. Okay. Explain the 4 main types of vaccines. Okay. Well, first, I guess I'm going to go with the transition word second. Second, it is important to understand the 4 main types of vaccines. All right, making sure I have my transition word here. Second, it's important to understand the 4 main types of vaccines. So your reds are going to be super simple and straightforward here. You're going to have 4 reds, right? I'm assuming that when Mrs. Zippel teaches you this, she's going to teach you about what those 4 types are. And you're going to talk about them. Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. And be specific. And I'm sure that each of these types has like a name for that type of vaccine. And talk about it. Don't just say the name though. Talk about like what is that type? How is it different from the others? So it might actually take a couple sentences for each one of these reds. All right? Don't be afraid to be really specific and elaborate a lot. All right, so we're going to talk about the 4 main types of vaccines. Now, here's an idea that I had. Here's what I would suggest. Star 3. Later on in the directions, Mrs. Zippel asked this. See how it talks about the testing steps, and then it says include a paragraph that explains how RNA vaccines are made. That's another type of vaccine. She says here it's a new type of vaccine. So, and she said put this paragraph wherever you think it fits. To me, it makes the most sense to talk about RNA vaccines here, right after we just finished talking about the main types of vaccines, rather than talk about the process and then come back and start talking about RNA vaccines. So I'm going to use the transition word also for this one. There is also a new type of vaccine called an RNA vaccine. Cool. And I have my transition word here. It's not the very first word, but that's okay. It's right there also. And so now my reds are going to be the specific details about the RNA vaccine. I don't know what those details are because I haven't done this unit or these lessons. I'm interested to know about it too, but like describe the RNA vaccine. It's probably going to be several sentences, right? Okay. By the way, this is going to be paragraph 4. Good. All right. So what are we going to talk about next? Star 4. The next thing we're going to talk about here is we already went through and we talked about this RNA vaccine. Now we need to go back here, and Mrs. Zippel said write 3 paragraphs explaining each of the 3 testing stages. So we can actually do all 3 of these next paragraphs together. Star 4, star 5, star 6. I'm going to really squeeze them in here. Okay. So these next 3 paragraphs are all going to sort of go with each other. And they're all going to be about the vaccine, did she say testing process? The vaccine testing stages, okay? By the way, this will be paragraphs 5, paragraph 6, and paragraph 7. Okay, so I'm assuming that, yeah, each one of these stages. So let's just say here, after the person has understood the virus, they've decided which type of vaccine they're going to do, then they have to test their vaccine, okay? So I might say here, next, the vaccine makers need to move into vaccine testing stage 1. All right, so I'm telling the reader that this whole paragraph is going to be about vaccine testing stage 1. I have a transition word, next, right here. Okay, and so then my reds for this paragraph are going to be all about describe testing stage 1. That's probably going to be several sentences talking about what happens in testing stage 1. All right, my next paragraph is going to be basically the same type of thing. These 3 paragraphs are sort of like cookie cutters of each other. It's just then we're going to talk about testing stage 2 and testing stage 3. So after that, they will move into testing stage 2. Here's my transition word, and my reds are going to be describe testing stage 2. And last but not least, I'm writing sort of small here. Finally, the scientists will do testing stage 3. Finally is my transition word. And the reds are going to be to describe Testing stage 3. Okay. There we go. Let me flip to the back, and I believe there's one more big idea that Mrs. Zippel wants us to talk about. I'm just going to keep my line going down here for a little bit more. What star am I on? Star 7. Star 7, which technically is actually going to be paragraph 8 because we had our introduction. But star 7, what does Mrs. Zippel want us to talk about last? The last big idea or supporting idea is, for a concluding paragraph, explain how the COVID-19 vaccine process is different from the typical vaccine process. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about here is this current COVID-19 vaccine development is shifting around the phases. So I just described the phases here, and I'm going to say here, however is a good word to show contrast, because I just said here are the regular stages. However, COVID-19 is going to do it this way instead. However, the COVID-19 development process is going to alter the regular testing stages. All right, there we go. I drew a horizontal line across here. This is going to be our 8th paragraph. And then these reds are, you're just going to talk about how it's different. Talk about how COVID-19 vaccine is different. It's going to probably be several sentences. All right. Yay, we're going to get to our final paragraph, paragraph 9 of your essay, which is a good essay is always, always, always going to wrap back around and remind the reader what your big idea was, what this whole thing you were talking about was. So our thesis statement was creating a vaccine is a complex process that has several steps. So I'm just going to rephrase that in a new way. So I might say something like, after scientists have gone through all the steps in this complex process, they will hopefully have a vaccine that is ready to use. That's sort of like my conclusion, but the main important part of my conclusion is that I'm restating my big idea. Again, I'm echoing my initial thesis statement. So there we have it. We've taken the directions and we've created basically a shell or an outline or a skeleton for your essay. You guys are welcome to use this. You do not have to use it word for word, but you're welcome to use this process to help you organize your essay.